Why would a waiter deliberately spill ice-cold water on Shaquille O'Neal? Did he not know who he was messing with? Or did he think he could get away with it? The entire restaurant froze as Shaq wiped his face, looking up with a smirk. "You sure about that?" he asked, his voice calm. Too calm. Within hours, the video of the incident would go viral, destroying the waiter's life. But no one, not even Shaq, expected what happened next. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The restaurant hums with soft music and clinking glasses until the front door swings open and a massive figure steps inside. For a split second, the world seems to pause. Conversations stutter, silverware hovers midair, and all eyes shift toward the entrance. The man standing in the doorway is impossible to ignore. Towering, broad-shouldered, and carrying an effortless presence that commands attention. Shaquille O'Neal steps inside, dressed in a fitted black hoodie, designer sneakers, and a gleaming watch that catches the dim chandelier light. Despite his casual attire, there's something undeniably sharp about him, a quiet confidence, a presence that fills the room without a single word. A murmur spreads through the restaurant like wildfire. Is that? Yeah, that's Shaq. No way, what's he doing here? At the hostess stand, a young woman in a crisp black uniform practically beams as she recognizes him. She smooths down her apron, trying to remain professional, but the excitement in her voice gives her away. "Welcome, Mr. O'Neal," she says, her hands clasping the reservation book a little too tightly. "It's an honor to have you with us tonight. Right this way." As she gestures toward a prime table near the windows, a few patrons discreetly pull out their phones. Some pretend to be checking messages, but their cameras are angled just right. Others try to act casual, sneaking glances as they whisper excitedly to their dinner companions. But not everyone is thrilled. Across the room near the bar, a young waiter stiffens at the sound of Shaq's name. Kyle. His jaw tightens, his fingers curling around the tray he's holding. Unlike the others, he doesn't whisper in awe. His expression darkens, lips pressing into a thin line. "Great," he mutters under his breath, his voice laced with irritation. "Another one." No one hears him. No one except the bartender, who gives him a sideways glance but says nothing. Kyle exhales sharply, shaking his head as he turns back to his station. To most, Shaq's arrival is exciting, a moment to remember. But to Kyle, it's just another overpaid celebrity, another entitled VIP expecting special treatment. And he's had enough of it. He doesn't know it yet, but this night is about to be unlike any other. And by the end of it, his entire world is going to change. Kyle mutters under his breath. "Great, another one. Let me know if this works or if you want any tweaks before moving to the next section." As Shaq settles in, he notices something odd. Every table around him is getting service, except his. The restaurant buzzes with quiet chatter, the clinking of silverware against fine china, and the occasional burst of laughter from a table across the room. Servers glide between tables, refilling drinks, taking orders, and delivering steaming plates of gourmet dishes. But Shaquille O'Neal, he's just sitting there. His menu remains untouched, the water glass in front of him still empty. The waitress at the table next to him leans in with a polite smile, taking an order from a couple dressed in evening wear. 2 tables over, a waiter places a sizzling steak in front of a businessman, topping off his wine without missing a beat. Shaq drums his fingers against the table, his dark eyes scanning the room. He's patient. He's been in enough high-end places to know things can get busy, but after the third time a waiter breezes past him without so much as a glance, something clicks in his mind. This isn't an accident. Across the room, Kyle moves effortlessly between customers, his apron perfectly tied, a pen tucked behind his ear. He chats easily with a group of young professionals near the bar, laughing at something one of them says before smoothly dropping off their check. Then he turns, and for a brief second, his eyes meet Shaq's. But just as quickly, he looks away. Shaq watches as Kyle walks right past his table, carrying a tray of drinks for a group of wealthy-looking executives near the private dining section. He doesn't stop, doesn't even pretend to glance Shaq's way. The first time, Shaq lets it slide. The second time, he raises an eyebrow. The third time, his patience thins. Just as Shaq leans back in his chair, a different waiter, A younger guy with wide, nervous eyes starts walking toward him. But before he can reach the table, Kyle appears out of nowhere, stepping in front of him with a casual but firm wave of his hand. "I got it," Kyle says, his voice low, but firm. The young waiter hesitates, confused, but then nods and steps away. Finally, Kyle strolls over to Shaq's table, his posture relaxed, almost too relaxed. But he doesn't make eye contact. Instead, he pulls a small notepad from his apron and clicks his pen with exaggerated slowness. "Yeah," Kyle mutters, still looking at the notepad like he's already tired of this conversation. "What do you want?" Shaq's eyes flick up, studying him. There's no warmth, no forced customer service smile, not even the fake politeness most high-end waiters put on. Just indifference. No, more than indifference. Contempt. Shaq exhales slowly, tilting his head slightly. "You in a rush or something?" he asks, smirking. Kyle's fingers tighten around the notepad for a split second, the only sign that Shaq's words hit harder than he wanted them to. The restaurant hums around them, unaware that something is about to shift. Kyle sighs loudly, the kind of exaggerated breath that makes it clear he doesn't want to be here. He pulls out his notepad with slow, deliberate movements, clicking his pen as if this whole process is exhausting. "Look," he mutters, finally glancing up at Shaq. "You ordering or what?" The tension at the table is thick now. The restaurant around them hums with activity, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, the occasional burst of laughter from a distant table. But at Shaq's table, a strange, stifling silence. Shaq lifts an eyebrow, studying Kyle for a long second. He's been around long enough to recognize when someone is testing him. "Yeah," Shaq says, his voice even, unreadable. "I'll take the ribeye, medium rare. Garlic mashed potatoes on the side, and a Coke." Kyle doesn't move, doesn't nod, doesn't even pretend to write it down. Shaq watches him, waiting. The silence drags a second too long before Kyle lets out another sigh, tapping the notepad against his palm. "Yeah, sure," he says, his smirk returning. "I'll see what I can do." Then he turns and walks away. Shaq watches him go, his jaw tightening slightly. He's had bad service before. He's dealt with rude employees, bad attitudes. But this is different. There's something deliberate about it, something personal. Minutes pass. 5, 10. Other guests continue enjoying their meals, forks scraping against plates, waiters weaving between tables with trays of steaming dishes. A waiter appears at the table to Shaq's left, setting down a beautifully plated salmon dish for a woman in a black dress. To his right, a man in a suit leans back as a server refills his wine glass. And Shaq? His table remains empty. No food, no drink, not even the damn water. Across the room, Kyle is chatting with another waiter, laughing at something as he leans against the counter near the kitchen doors. He doesn't glance back at Shaq's table, doesn't acknowledge the fact that he should be doing his job. It's blatant now. Shaq exhales slowly, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the table. He's patient. But even patience has a limit. At the table next to him, a mother and her young daughter are enjoying their dinner. The little girl, no older than 8, twirls spaghetti around her fork, her legs swinging under the chair. But then she stops, her bright eyes flicking towards Shaq's empty table. "Mom," she says, her voice innocent but curious. "How come he's not eating?" The mother glances over, frowning slightly when she sees the empty space in front of Shaq. She looks around the restaurant, spotting the steady stream of waiters moving from table to table, all avoiding this one. Her expression shifts, confusion morphing into something sharper. "Good question," she murmurs. A few tables over, another couple starts noticing. A man whispers something to his wife, nodding toward Shaq's table. The energy in the room is shifting. And across the restaurant, Olivia, the general manager, is watching. From her spot near the bar, Olivia has been paying attention for the past 15 minutes. At first it was subtle, a slight delay in service, a missing drink order. But now it's undeniable. She narrows her eyes following the path of her waitstaff, seeing how they move effortlessly through the room, except when it comes to one particular table, Kyle. Olivia's lips press into a thin line. Kyle has worked here for a while. She's dealt with complaints about him before. Attitude problems, a tendency to be rude to certain customers. She's given warnings. Too many, maybe. But this is something else. She watches as Shaq leans back in his chair, his massive frame somehow relaxed but still imposing. His smirk is faint, barely there, but unmistakable, like a man who knows exactly what's about to happen. This, Shaq murmurs under his breath, just loud enough for himself. This is about to get interesting. The restaurant hums with quiet conversations, the distant clatter of plates, and the murmur of diners enjoying their meals. But at Shaq's table, the air is different. It's thick, charged. The absence of food in front of him hasn't gone unnoticed by the other customers. Then finally, Kyle returns, but not with Shaq's meal. In his hands, balanced carefully on a tray, is a single massive glass of ice water. Nothing else. Shaq watches him approach, his expression unreadable. Across the room, Olivia, the restaurant manager, leans slightly forward, watching, sensing something's off. Kyle stops just a little too close, standing at an angle that makes no sense if he was just delivering a drink. Then with the tiniest tilt of his wrist, splash. Freezing water cascades over Shaq's chest, drenching his hoodie, soaking into his jeans. The ice cubes hit his skin like tiny punches before clattering to the floor. A collective gasp sweeps through the restaurant. A fork drops onto a plate. The low hum of chatter dies instantly. Kyle, barely masking his smirk, sets the now empty glass down on the table with a soft clink. He shrugs, feigning innocence. "Oops," he says, dragging out the word. "My bad." Shaq doesn't move, doesn't flinch. He calmly picks up a napkin, dabbing at the water dripping from his chin. His breathing remains steady, his massive hands barely moving. Kyle shifts his weight slightly, waiting for a reaction, expecting one. A laugh escapes from a man at a nearby table, uncomfortable and unsure. The woman with him nudges his arm, shaking her head. Shaq finally sets the napkin down, slow and deliberate. Then he looks up. His deep brown eyes lock onto Kyle's, holding him there. His voice is quiet, too quiet, but there's something dangerous beneath it. "You sure about that?" Kyle's smirk twitches, his confidence flickering for just a second. He opens his mouth to say something, but across the room, Olivia steps forward. She's seen enough. The restaurant isn't just quiet, it's dead silent, the kind of silence that makes people hold their breath. Shaq sits there, water dripping from his soaked hoodie, pooling onto the floor beneath him. His large hands rest calmly on the table, fingers tapping against the polished wood in a slow, deliberate rhythm. He doesn't flinch, doesn't wipe the water away. But his eyes are locked onto Kyle. The people watching don't know what's coming next, but something about the way Shaq is too calm makes it feel more dangerous than if he jumped to his feet. Kyle, standing with the empty tray still in his hands, shrugs. "It happens," he mutters, brushing off the moment like it's nothing. A couple at a nearby table isn't buying it. The woman leans toward her husband, whispering just loud enough for others to hear. "No way that was an accident." The words carry, rippling through the room like a stone tossed into still water. Shaq remains seated. He doesn't yell, doesn't curse, doesn't demand an apology. Instead, he slowly, deliberately leans back in his chair, resting an elbow on the table. Then he smirks. "Okay," he says, voice smooth but laced with something undeniably dangerous. "Let's play." Kyle's smirk falters for half a second. Just half a second. The staff behind the counter are frozen in place. Other servers, ones who weren't ignoring Shaq, exchange glances, their expressions shifting from nervousness to something close to satisfaction. Shaq wipes his face with a napkin as if nothing happened. "You good, sir?" Kyle asks, voice dripping with insincerity. Shaq sets the napkin down. "Oh, I'm great," he says, his smirk never wavering. "But I gotta ask, you sure about that?" Kyle shrugs again, this time more defensive. "Look, man, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but..." From across the restaurant, a sharp voice cuts through the tension. "Kyle?" Heads snap toward the source. Olivia. The restaurant's general manager, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense stance, stands near the bar, arms folded. She's been watching the entire time, and she does not look happy. Kyle tenses but quickly rolls his shoulders, forcing another smirk. "Oh, hey, Olivia," he says, voice overly casual. Just a little mishap, no big deal. Olivia takes a slow, calculated step forward. No big deal, she repeats, her voice carrying the kind of authority that makes the entire room listen. A few employees standing near the kitchen exchange uneasy glances. Kyle gestures vaguely at Shaq, still seated, still calm. It was an accident, he says. Happens all the time. Olivia raises an eyebrow. An accident? She echoes. She folds her arms. Let me make sure I understand, she says. You ignored Mr. O'Neal's table, refused to serve him, let everyone else get their food before him, and then, when you finally brought something, you just so happened to dump a full glass of ice water all over him? Kyle opens his mouth, then closes it. The weight of Olivia's words settles over the entire room. People are watching closely now. Some guests who had been eating moments ago have set their forks down, their attention fully captured. A man at the far end of the restaurant leans forward, whispering to his wife, He's done. Kyle tries to laugh, but it comes out forced. Look, it's not that serious, he says, voice slightly strained. It was a mistake. Shaq, still smirking, tilts his head slightly. Say that again, Shaq says, his voice low and dangerously calm. Say it with a straight face. Kyle swallows hard. Olivia doesn't blink. Step into my office. Now! The words hit like a hammer. For the first time since this started, Kyle looks nervous. What? He stammers. Olivia, come on, you're not serious. You want me to say it louder? Olivia asks, voice cold. Kyle glances around. He looks to the customers. No support. He looks to the other waiters. Still nothing. Even the bartender, usually indifferent to drama, won't make eye contact. A deep silence settles over the restaurant. Kyle clenches his jaw. So what, you're gonna fire me? He snaps. Over this? Over him? Shaq laughs, shaking his head. You really don't get it, do you? Olivia asks, voice carrying a mix of disbelief and disappointment. Kyle's face is turning red now. This is ridiculous, he mutters. I work my ass off here, and you're taking his side? Olivia steps closer, her gaze like steel. This isn't about taking sides, she says. This is about respect, something you clearly don't understand. Kyle's fists clench at his sides. He's trapped and he knows it. But then, something unexpected happens. A slow clap comes from a table nearby. Then another, and another. Within seconds, half the restaurant is clapping. Kyle looks around, his expression shifting from anger to panic. Shaq simply sits there watching. You gonna stand there all night? Shaq asks. Or you gonna go? Kyle's smirk is completely gone. Olivia tilts her head toward the kitchen. Clock out. You're done here. The weight of her words finally settles in. Kyle's face goes pale. He stands there for another second, like he's waiting for someone, anyone, to come to his defense. No one does. Finally, his shoulders drop. Without another word, Kyle turns and storms toward the back. But as he disappears behind the kitchen doors, he doesn't realize one thing. Someone had been recording, and by the time he steps outside, the world will know exactly what just happened. Kyle's smirk falters as Olivia says, Step into my office. Now! Kyle lets out a nervous laugh, his eyes darting between Shaq and Olivia. The confidence he had just moments ago is gone, replaced by an uneasiness that's starting to show. Come on, he says, forcing another chuckle. You're not seriously mad, right? No one laughs. Olivia's face is stone cold. Arms crossed, her stare could burn a hole straight through him. You think that was funny? She asks, her voice sharp enough to cut through the thick silence hanging over the restaurant. Kyle stammers, taking a small step back. I mean, it was an accident. Shaq, still sitting, still dripping with water, raises an eyebrow. He doesn't move, doesn't even reach for a napkin. Say that again, Shaq says, his voice calm but dangerously firm. Say it with a straight face. Kyle opens his mouth, but no words come out. The customers are still watching. The other waiters are frozen in place, exchanging glances, waiting to see how this unfolds. Kyle swallows hard. He shifts uncomfortably, suddenly aware that all the power he thought he had is slipping through his fingers. It's just, he starts, then sighs heavily. Look, things got a little out of hand, okay? It wasn't personal? Olivia steps forward, shaking her head. Not personal, she repeats, voice laced with disbelief. You ignored him, refused to take his order, And when you finally showed up, you dumped a full glass of water on him. Kyle throws up his hands. I said it was an accident. Then why are you the only one laughing? Olivia fires back. Kyle glances around the room, expecting at least one person to defend him. No one does. A middle-aged woman near the bar mutters, disgusting behavior. A man in a suit at the corner table shakes his head. He should have been fired years ago. Kyle's face flushes red. He turns back to Olivia, eyes pleading now. Look, But Olivia is done listening. Enough! Kyle flinches at the force behind her voice. You've disrespected a guest, humiliated this restaurant, and now you're trying to act like it's no big deal. She takes a deep breath, steady but firm. Clock out, Kyle. You're done. Kyle's jaw drops. Wait, you're firing me? Over this? Not over this, Olivia replies coldly. Because of who you are. This just proved it. Kyle looks around frantically, waiting for someone, anyone, to step in. But the other waiters just lower their eyes. A long, painful silence fills the space. Shaq finally wipes his face with a napkin, leans back in his chair, and watches Kyle's entire world crumble. Then Olivia delivers the final blow. Clean yourself out of my restaurant. Kyle stands frozen, his breath caught in his throat. He can't believe this is happening, but it is, and it's far from over. Kyle's jaw drops, his face twisting in disbelief. Wait, you're firing me? His voice cracks slightly as he throws up his hands. Over him? A murmur ripples through the restaurant. Customers whisper, waiters glance at each other. But Olivia doesn't flinch. She simply folds her arms, standing tall. Not over him, Kyle, she says, her tone cold and unwavering. Over you. Kyle lets out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Are you serious? I've worked here for years. He looks around, searching for backup. Somebody say something. But no one does. The other waiters keep their heads down. A few glance at Olivia, but they don't dare challenge her decision. At a table near the window, a group of regular customers, an older couple and a man in a business suit, exchange knowing looks. The man sighs and mutters, should have seen this coming. Kyle whirls around to face them. Oh, now everyone's got something to say. His voice is growing louder, his frustration turning to anger. You all want to gang up on me now? For what? Because I don't kiss every VIP's ass? Shaq, still sitting, still calm, raises an eyebrow. That what you think this is? Kyle glares at him. I don't know, man. Why don't you tell me? Olivia steps forward before Shaq can respond. Kyle, enough. Her voice is sharp, final. This isn't about him being a VIP. It's about respect, something you clearly don't understand. Kyle's breathing is uneven now. His fingers twitch at his sides. He's running out of things to say, out of ways to spin this in his favor. You think you're going to find another job after this? Olivia asks, her voice quiet but lethal. Because trust me, people talk, and you just made yourself a headline. A cold chill runs down Kyle's spine. The reality of the moment finally hits him. This isn't just about tonight. This is about his entire reputation. Kyle's chest rises and falls quickly. He wants to fight back, to say something clever. But for the first time in his life, he has no words. A painful silence lingers. Then Olivia gives the final order. Pack your things, you're done here. Kyle clenches his jaw so hard it aches. His face is red, his hands trembling with frustration. For a moment, he looks like he might explode, might say something he can't take back. But instead, he lets out a sharp exhale, shoving past a chair as he storms toward the back. The restaurant stays silent as the door swings shut behind him. But Shaq? He just smirks. Because Kyle's problems are only just beginning. Kyle thinks the worst is over. He has no idea what's about to happen next. Kyle slumps onto his worn-out couch, fingers clenched around his phone. His hands are clammy, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. He hasn't slept. Not after what happened at the restaurant. His mind replays Olivia's final words. Pack your things. You're done here. But what shakes him even more is the silence from his co-workers, the way no one defended him, as if they had all been waiting for this moment. Still, he tells himself it'll blow over. It always does. Then his phone vibrates, and again, and again. His notifications explode. Messages, missed calls, a flood of alerts from social media. Kyle furrows his brows and unlocks his screen. His stomach drops. Trending number 3. Waiter tries to humiliate Shaq and ends up jobless. His throat tightens. Wait, what? His eyes dart across the screen, scrolling through hundreds, no, thousands of posts. Breaking video shows waiter spilling water on Shaquille O'Neal. On purpose, gets fired on the spot, 15.6 million views. Posted 4 hours ago, Kyle's face drains of color. A customer filmed the entire thing. The moment he walked past Shaq's table. The moment he ignored him while serving others. The moment he mocked him before accidentally spilling the water. It's all there. Every smirk, every insult, every mistake. And now, the world is watching. Kyle's thumb hovers over the video, hesitating before hitting play. The sound of gasps and whispers fills his tiny apartment. The diner's customers react in real time, watching his downfall unfold. Shaq's face remains calm, even as water drips from his shirt. Then comes the line that seals Kyle's fate. The moment Shaq wipes his face, looks up and says, "You sure about that?" The comment section is ruthless. This dude really thought he could mess with Shaq? Career suicide. Bro got fired faster than my Wi-Fi loads. Never seen karma work this fast. Somebody check on Kyle. Imagine being this cocky and this dumb. Kyle grits his teeth, scrolling faster, desperate to find a comment, any comment, defending him. There aren't any. His name is ruined. His phone dings again. A new message from his mom. "Kyle, what did you do?" Kyle's stomach twists. Before he can respond, his screen flickers. An incoming call. Unknown number. He stares at it, his pulse hammering in his ears. Because somehow, deep down, he knows. He's not ready for what's next. Kyle's world is crumbling, and this is only the beginning. Kyle's eyes flicker open, the dim light of his phone screen casting eerie shadows across his ceiling. His head throbs from a restless night, tossing, turning, replaying everything that happened at the restaurant. Maybe it's over. Maybe it'll all just fade away. But then his phone buzzes. Once, twice, then in a relentless, suffocating wave. His notifications are exploding. Kyle frowns, grabbing his phone from the nightstand. The moment he unlocks it, his stomach drops. His name is everywhere. Kyle the waiter, America's newest villain. Man thought he could disrespect Shaq. How'd that work out? Karma comes for Kyle, the internet's newest punchline. His breath quickens as he scrolls. His Twitter feed is a battlefield. Jenna, BW, never eating anywhere this guy works. Absolute clown. A sports fan 23. You messed with Shaq? Dumbest career move in history. Is Chef Tom. I worked with Kyle. He's always been a jerk. This ain't new. Kyle's face burns. He stares at that last tweet. The name hits him like a punch to the gut. Chef Tom, his old boss. Kyle's hand shakes as he taps the reply section. He wants to fire back, to defend himself. This isn't fair. They don't know the whole story. Before he can type, another notification pops up. His LinkedIn profile. Kyle swipes to it, expecting at least a few professional contacts to back him up. Instead, he finds hundreds of comments. Unprofessional? Rude? Should never be in customer service again. Who wants to bet this guy's been fired before? Imagine treating people like garbage and thinking you'll get away with it. Kyle's throat tightens. He flicks to his inbox, desperate to find something, anything that isn't hate. Instead, an email stands out. Subject, termination of employment. Final notice. Kyle's stomach churns. It's from his last restaurant, the one before this job. They saw the video. They're removing him from their records entirely. His hands grip the phone so tight his knuckles turn white. This isn't just social media backlash. This is his entire career unraveling. A sharp knock at the door makes him jump. His roommate's voice is muffled but tense. Dude? I think you should see this. Kyle grits his teeth, heart pounding. What now? Kyle has no idea, but the worst is still coming. The camera rolls, the lights are bright. Shaq leans forward in his chair, hands clasped together, his expression unreadable. It ain't about me, he says, shaking his head. It's about how people treat others. The interviewer, a polished news anchor, nods. This incident went viral overnight. Millions of people saw what happened in that restaurant. What was going through your mind when that waiter, Kyle, treated you like that? Shaq exhales slowly. Man, I've been black my whole life. This ain't new. But here's the thing. People think because you got money or fame, it don't happen to you. It does. And if it happens to me, imagine what happens to folks without a camera watching. The room is silent. The weight of his words settles. The footage of the water being accidentally spilled. The smug smirk on Kyle's face. The frozen moment when Olivia, the restaurant's manager, stepped in to fire him. It all played out like a lesson on karma. The restaurant had already released a statement. We have zero tolerance for discrimination. We stand by our manager's decision. Olivia's leadership was being praised. She had been promoted. The restaurant was gaining attention, but this time for the right reasons. Meanwhile, Kyle's downfall was public and brutal. The interviewer shifts in her seat. Kyle says he's being unfairly judged. He claims it was just a misunderstanding. What do you think? Shaq's expression doesn't change. Nah, he says simply. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. A clip from the viral video plays on the screen. Kyle ignoring Shaq. Kyle smirking. The moment he dumped the water and pretended it was an accident. The internet had picked him apart. Comments flashed across the screen. Hope he enjoys unemployment. Dude had it coming. Imagine throwing your whole career away in front of Shaq. Kyle had become a meme, a cautionary tale. Shaq shakes his head again. People gotta learn. Respect ain't optional. You don't get to pick and choose who you treat with dignity. The interview ends, but the conversation online keeps growing. Kyle, sitting in his apartment, refreshes his email for the 100th time. No job offers, no sympathy, just another notification that someone dug up an old complaint from a past coworker. But then, a new email appears. Kyle's eyes narrow. The subject line reads, "A second chance, if you want it." He hesitates before clicking. His hands are shaking. The email opens, and as he reads, his heart starts to pound. Someone is offering him a way out. But there's a catch. Kyle stared at the screen, his breath shallow. His inbox had been nothing but hate mail, job rejections, and endless notifications from strangers tearing him apart online. But this, a job offer. His fingers trembled as he clicked the email open. Subject, an opportunity for change. Dear Kyle, we've seen the video. We've seen the backlash. We also believe that people can learn from their mistakes if they're willing to own them. Our community kitchen serves those in need, people who don't get second chances. We're offering you a role here, but there's one condition. You must make a public apology, a real one. No excuses, no defensiveness, just the truth. Let us know if you're ready. The helping hands. Kitchen. Kyle's pulse pounded in his ears. A job, a lifeline, but an apology? He clenched his jaw. His entire life, he had never been the type to admit he was wrong. His default response had always been to blame someone else, to deflect, to act like it wasn't a big deal. But now, he had nothing left. His rent was due in 2 weeks. His LinkedIn was a graveyard. No restaurant in town would touch him. His old co-workers had publicly called him out. Even people he barely knew had distanced themselves. This was his only shot. Kyle exhaled sharply and grabbed his phone. The red recording light flickered on. He stared into the camera, swallowing back the bitterness in his throat. Then, for the first time in his life, he spoke without sarcasm. I messed up, he said, his voice quieter than usual. And I don't just mean that night in the restaurant. I've spent years treating people like they were beneath me. I thought that made me stronger, but all it did was make me a smaller person. He paused, licking his lips. What I did to Shaquille O'Neal, it was wrong. Not because he's famous, not because I got caught, but because no one deserves to be treated like that. Kyle's hands tightened around his phone. He had never felt this vulnerable before. I want to be better, and I'm willing to prove it. He took a shaky breath and ended the recording. The video was live within minutes. For the first time in weeks, the comments section didn't immediately tear him apart. Wow, didn't expect that. If he means it, maybe he deserves a second chance. We'll see if his actions match his words. Kyle didn't know what to expect. But later that night, someone else saw the video. Shaq. And for the first time since this whole mess started, Shaq actually smiled. Kyle never thought a place like this would change him. The smell of fresh bread and simmering soup filled the air as he moved through the bustling community kitchen, stacking plates, ladling out food, and greeting people with a quiet nod instead of a smirk. This wasn't a high-end restaurant. No white tablecloths, no overpriced entrees, no VIP guests demanding special treatment. Instead, the people in line were homeless, struggling families, and those just trying to get by. And for the first time in a long time, Kyle was doing something that actually mattered. "Appreciate it, man," a scruffy-looking older man muttered as Kyle handed him a tray. Kyle nodded. "Enjoy your meal." The man smiled, genuinely smiled, and something in Kyle's chest tightened. It had been a long time since anyone looked at him without judgment. He deserved the hate he got. He had been arrogant, cruel, and thought himself untouchable. But when everything was stripped away, his job, his reputation, his so-called confidence, he had nothing left but a choice: to stay the same or be better. Kyle chose the latter. One afternoon, as he wiped down a table, a voice cut through the noise of the kitchen. "You still spilling drinks on people? Or you got that under control?" Kyle froze. He knew that voice. Slowly he turned. Shaquille O'Neal stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a knowing grin on his face. Kyle swallowed hard, the memory of the accident flashing through his mind. The ice-cold water, the gasps, the humiliation. But Shaq wasn't looking at him like an enemy. Kyle straightened his shoulders, forcing himself to hold eye contact. "I think I got it under control now." Shaq smirked. "Good." They stood there for a moment, two men who had once been on opposite sides of a mess neither would forget. Then Shaq nodded toward the kitchen. "Food any good here?" Kyle exhaled a small laugh, some of the tension in his chest easing. "Yeah, no five-star menu, but it's real. And it matters." Shaq studied him, then gave a slow nod. "That's what I like to hear." As Kyle turned back to his work, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel like a failure. For the first time in years, he felt like a man who had finally learned. That night, Shaq posted a simple message online. "Lesson learned?" The comments flooded in. Looks like Kyle turned things around. "Respect is everything. What you serve to the world always comes back to you." Kyle had once served arrogance and cruelty. Now, he was serving something better.